Imagine a world totally adrift at sea, an island ark that sailed through time, completely untouched by the mammals that took over the rest of the planet. Now picture what would happen on a place like that. With no predators hunting them on the ground, birds just stopped flying. They started walking the earth, growing to monster sizes, and evolving into some of the strangest and most wonderful shapes you can possibly imagine. This isn't a fantasy novel. This was real. This was Aotearoa, New Zealand. So how did this small, remote country become this incredible laboratory for bird evolution? What ancient forces created these feathered wonders? And more importantly, what happened when this paradise finally collided with the outside world? Stick around as we unravel the unbelievable story of New Zealand's birds, their rise, their tragic fall, and the desperate fight to save what's left. Our story starts more than 80 million years ago. Back then, New Zealand wasn't even an island. It was just a piece of the giant supercontinent Gondwana. But as the Earth's crust shifted and groaned, New Zealand broke off and started a long, lonely voyage into the ocean. And this decision to go it alone, this total isolation, is the single biggest reason its wildlife is so strange. For millions and millions of years, New Zealand was almost completely cut off. Life here played by a different set of rules. While mammals were rising to dominate everywhere else, New Zealand remained a land without them. Think about that. No native land mammals. No lions, no tigers, no bears. Not even a single mouse to scurry through the undergrowth. The only mammals that made it were a couple of tiny bat species that got blown in by the wind. This complete absence of land mammals created an evolutionary vacuum, a huge opportunity. And one group of animals was perfectly placed to step up and take over everything: the birds. But what they became was stranger than anyone could have predicted. With nothing to chase them on the ground, flying just wasn't worth the energy anymore. So a lot of birds simply gave it up. You got the iconic kiwi, basically a mammal in disguise, sniffing out food with nostrils at the tip of its beak. You've got the kakapo, the world's heaviest and only flightless parrot. And towering over all of them, the moa. A whole family of giant, peaceful herbivores, some growing taller than a basketball hoop. This didn't just lead to flightlessness. It allowed birds to fill every role in the ecosystem. The top predator wasn't a big cat, it was the Haast's eagle, the largest eagle that ever lived, with talons as big as a tiger's, built to hunt giant moa. You had the kea, a parrot that evolved to be as smart and curious as a primate. Even the insects, like the weta, got huge and started acting like mice. New Zealand had become a true bird kingdom. Living in this predator-free paradise for millions of years also made these birds incredibly naive. They evolved to be bold, curious, and fearless. Why would they be scared? Nothing had ever given them a reason to be. This evolutionary quirk, born from an age of peace, would tragically become their Achilles heel. Because this peaceful isolation was about to be shattered by the arrival of a new, intelligent, and far-reaching mammal. A predator like no one had ever seen here before. Around 800 years ago, that long isolation ended. Polynesian navigators, the ancestors of modern Maori, became the first humans to set foot here. They found a land teeming with birds that were often tame and easy to hunt. The giant moa became a critical source of food. But they didn't come alone. They brought with them an accidental stowaway, the kiore, or Polynesian rat. For the small birds nesting on the ground, this tiny new predator was an absolute nightmare. Then, just a few hundred years ago, a second wave of humans arrived. European explorers and settlers saw a land of opportunity. Forests were cleared at a shocking rate for timber and farmland, destroying habitats that had stood for thousands of years. But the real disaster came from the animals they brought with them, intentionally or not. Ship rats and Norway rats, bigger and more aggressive. Stoats, weasels, and ferrets, brought in to control rabbits, but they preferred hunting birds. Possums, brought for a fur trade that destroyed the forests. And feral cats. For New Zealand's birds, who had never faced a mammalian predator in their entire evolutionary history, it was an apocalypse. They had no defenses. The moa were gone, and the Haast's eagle starved without them. The beautiful huia vanished. The laughing owl fell silent forever. A biological paradise was becoming a graveyard. How could anything possibly survive this? Today, New Zealand's native birds are in a fight for their lives. The onslaught of these introduced predators is still the single biggest threat. But now, Kiwis, the people, not the birds, are fighting back. A hugely passionate conservation movement has risen up to protect their country's most unique treasures. And the fight is happening on all fronts. There are huge networks of traps across the country. Entire islands have been painstakingly cleared of every single predator, turning them into lifeboats, or arks, where the most endangered birds can be safe. Mainland sanctuaries are protected by massive high-tech fences. And for species on the absolute brink, like the Kakapo, there are intensive breeding programs that are basically life support. It's an all-out effort. The challenge is so huge, it led to one of the most ambitious conservation goals on the entire planet: Predator-Free 2050. The plan is to completely remove the worst of the worst, rats, stoats, and possums, from the whole country by the year 2050. It sounds almost impossible. But are these crazy efforts actually working? The answer, amazingly, is yes. Against all odds, there are incredible signs of hope. The black robin was brought back from just 5 birds and only 1 fertile female. The kakapo, once thought doomed, now has a population of over 250 and it's climbing. Species that were confined to a few tiny islands are now being brought back to the mainland. Their songs are returning to forests that had been silent for a century. These stories prove that with enough dedication, we can begin to turn back the clock. The future for these birds depends on us. It's about inspiring the next generation to care for this tawanga, this treasure. Every trap set, every chick raised, every tree planted is a small victory in a huge battle. It's a battle to make sure these incredible birds can not only survive, but one day thrive again in the land they alone once ruled. New Zealand's bird life is a living story of evolution, a story of wonder, of terrible loss, and now of determined hope. The fight is far from over, but the will to protect these unique creatures is stronger than ever. If this story captured your imagination, you can be part of the solution. Learn more about the groups on the ground doing the hard work. And if you get the chance to visit, be a traveler that respects its precious and fragile home. So, I have to ask, which New Zealand bird fascinates you the most?